Today is March 17th, 2015, and this is episode 109 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Good evening, Jerry. Thanks for having me, as always.
You're very welcome.
I must admit, I am indeed fighting a bit of Ebola plague something or other, so my voice is a mess.
Conbola, right?
My throat's a mess. I'm coughing. So if anybody wonders why I sound like I'm sick, it's because I'm sick.
And not in the usual way.
Correct. In a more unique and varied way.
Yes.
However, all that being said, I wouldn't miss the show.
And we appreciate your sacrifice.
Well, if I'm not here, geez, I remember what the first 30 episodes were like.
Oh, you gotta go there. These opinions, as always, do not represent those of our employer, past, present, or future. Okay, so first up, B-Sides Atlanta was this past Saturday, and the talks were pretty good. Actually, one of them in particular was very good.
Which one was that?
It had something to do with dying on the internet.
Oh yeah, that was a rough talk.
Yeah.
But yes, I did give a talk outlining a couple things. One, good buddy of the hacker community, good friend of mine, passed away back in December through an unexpected car accident. Not that car accidents are ever expected, but this was a very sudden thing. He had a lot of IT gear up and running, all sorts of stuff, and I give a talk about how I've been helping his widow sort of figure out that stuff, pick up the pieces, shut down stuff that isn't necessary, figure out what he had running at the colo, all of his side businesses, trying to get into his laptops, trying to get into his time capsules, recover family photos, all that kind of jazz. And then I also went into recommendations of things people can do to make it easier for their loved ones if they have an extensive IT infrastructure and suddenly word to pass in this world of online stuff. And we talked a little bit about the various different policies and things you can do with the various online services out there as well when it comes to these sorts of issues. So I hope the talk was received well. It seemed like it was. And I'm hoping that the video of that will be posted in the next few weeks, and when it is, we'll let you know.
Absolutely, and we'll we'll post it on the website so people can see it. It's definitely, I think, worth watching. It's something that I don't think most people really think about, and we probably should. So, moving on, our next topic is a security conference that I had not previously heard of, and I wanted to bring it to everyone's attention. It is called the High Tech Crime Investigation Association, and it is a conference held in Orlando, Florida from August 30th through September 2nd. And the organizers have actually offered to give listeners of our podcast a 15% discount off of the ticket price if you use the promo code Defensive Security without a space.
Which nearly pays for the cost of the podcast itself to our listeners.
Absolutely.
They're almost making money.
Almost. Except for the time invested. Oh, yeah. So the other bit of news is I believe we will have a ticket to raffle, and Mr. Callett and I are conferring on how we are going to work the logistics of that, and we will discuss that in an upcoming show. In the meantime, you can.
Do we know the average ticket rate? Do we know what tickets go for at this thing?
Yes, the ticket price is $595.
Wow, that's pretty healthy. So 15% off of that is also pretty healthy. That's $90.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
not bad.
look what we do for our listeners.
That's right.
We're awesome.
And also, just so you know, actually, I at least I don't know about you, but I'm intending to be down there, and I think we will very likely record an episode while we're there and maybe interview some people. So
when we know it's in Orlando, but when is this conference?
it is August 30th through September 2nd in Orlando, Florida. And then the other big conference of the year for us, at least, is, of course, DerbyCon.
That's right. And you're giving away like 18 free hotel rooms, I heard.
Oh, my gosh.
No?
No.
That's a lie.
The rumors of that are not true. So,
all right. I heard you were giving away a free beer to the first listener that found us.
I will do that, or whatever drink you may want within reason. All right. So that, I think that concludes the.
But we're going to DerbyCon, I think.
Yeah, we are definitely going to DerbyCon, and
yes,
I believe tickets go on sale in early May. I highly recommend that you buy them early. It's not like ShmooCon. They don't go out of style that fast. But I do recommend you buy them soon. And also, if you want to stay at the hotel, I would highly recommend you book the room early. Those do go pretty fast.
Now, the only caveat there, Jerry stayed at the Con Hotel last year. I did not. During the parties, you said you could, even though you're across the hotel, you could still hear music.
I was across the hotel. I was up, 12 floors, and I had earplugs in, and I could still hear the music.
So if you are a picky sleeper like me, and you're lame like me, and you don't stay at the party all night like me, this may not be the best plan.
Well, that's true. Plan accordingly. But it is nice to not have to stumble off to some other hotel. So anyway, getting into our stories. Our first story tonight is something that is very similar to what we talked about. I believe it was last week or the week before. The story comes to us from the website firstcoastnews.com, and the story is about the city of Orange Park, Florida, apparently almost lost $500,000.
Oh my.
The story goes that a city employee's email account was compromised by an attacker, and then the attacker subsequently used the email account to distribute malware. I presume some sort of rat or banking Trojan, not really clear what they distributed. And, in grand fashion, apparently, I think they actually said, a lot of our employees, and this is a quote, a lot of our employees opened it and they shouldn't have. So, there's really two things. One is I did a little bit of homework and found that this city actually uses Outlook.com. Right. So, this is not a situation where their email is behind a VPN on a protected network. So it's entirely possible that this was some kind of a credential reuse type of attack. The other issue I see is that we do a good job, I think often do a good job of trying to educate people about looking for, quote, suspicious attachments and not opening attachments from unknown people. But if you get an email with an attachment, particularly if it looks somewhat reasonable, from one of your coworkers, are you really, and by all appearances, it's actually an email from your coworker. What do we do in terms of training our employees to resist that? That's a very difficult problem. And
yeah, it is.
One of the reasons I like to say education is not a technical control.
No, and I was thinking that. I was also thinking about the Outlook.com side of this. So that's obviously Microsoft's hosted email in the cloud, and likely they were single-factor authentication, static passwords.
Right.
So apparently whatever malware they distributed, Outlook.com is clearly not running any sort of anti-malware that would pick it up.
Well, it's easy to say that, right?
Well, it's obvious. It must be the case.
Well, no, I mean, I agree with you, but I don't think we can be surprised by that.
No, but the point I'm making is that this is an interesting downside to going to a cloud email provider, is that the opportunity to use something like a FireEye or one of the other many sandboxing email scrubbing solutions is lost when you go to an outsourced provider. So when you go to a more advanced malware detection system, you don't have that option in this case.
Right. No anti-malware in the cloud for you.
Right. I'd be very curious in a situation like this to do a bake-off to see how well Google Apps would have picked this up versus Outlook.com. I wonder if there's a difference. I have the sense, though it is completely unscientific, that Google does a better job picking this stuff up with their cloud app, Google Apps for Business, than Outlook.com does.
Yeah, I still think that's a crapshoot. I mean,
certainly
it's so easy. It's so easy to obscure malware these days.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, we go back to having to harden the endpoint because the endpoint is always under attack.
Right.
So what can we have done at the endpoint to stop this malware? Don't know much about the malware.
Yeah, obviously that's the disadvantage. We really don't know exactly what it was. I assume it was given the context of the story, I'm assuming that it was a dire type banking malware, banking Trojan. And just based on the context, it doesn't sound like a rat or anything like that. But we really don't know. So it's difficult to say if removing admin rights or whitelisting or what would have really worked. But I'm going to guess that the city probably didn't have a high level of sophistication, but I don't know that to be true. There's really no context at all about what they did or did not have in place or what the malware was and was not. So I just thought the story was really interesting. Fortunately for them, they didn't actually lose the money. Their bank was able to reverse the transaction before it got away. But we've seen too many times where that doesn't happen, and I think that this kind of attack is becoming extremely common, or at least a lot more common, because it works and it's very profitable. Moving on to our next story, which comes from McAfee, and this is kind of a story we don't often talk about. The title is "Targeted Attack Campaign Against Indian Organizations Continue with More Exploits Focused on National Events." What I thought particularly interesting about this one is, I guess, we often talk about U.S.-centric stories, and this is an interesting one that was focused on Indian government and Indian entities.
And by Indian, you mean the subcontinent of...
Correct.
Not the Native American misbranded version.
Correct.
Yes. Just to be clear.
Good catch. Right.
I mean, this could be, going after a gambling mecca. I don't know.
Yeah. So the unique thing here is that this was apparently a campaign, a fairly sophisticated campaign, and thank goodness there's no attempt at attribution, right? They do point out where some of the command and control infrastructure is, but they don't make any assertions on who did it. But apparently it was going on since 2010, and I think at least up through the end of 2014. What was interesting to me is the approach they took, which was using Word documents that contained exploit code, and the documents were actually, as far as I can tell, actually contained, real information, and they were kind of timely and aimed at a particular happening, right? So some type of a current event, so a couple of the file names they have are Indian Diplomacy at Work, UNSC, reforms.doc. And this attack apparently leveraged those kinds of current events to con people into opening them. And further, what I thought our listeners might really like is taking a look at what this infrastructure kind of gave the attackers the ability to do. And I would say this, from my perspective, what I've seen, this malware doesn't seem particularly sophisticated. What it basically did was drop onto the system. It send off some telemetry about the system that was infected, and in particular, it gave an inventory of documents on the system and uploaded that. So apparently, presumably, whoever was running the infrastructure could then go through and kind of like go into the supermarket, pick which documents they wanted to go after. And then it also gave them the ability to download or upload, depending on how you look at it, additional malware for other purposes. But, this, to me, again, I think this is an interesting perspective that we don't often see, that when someone opens a document, like in the story we just talked about, here's kind of what can happen, right?
Yeah, it's, we've been having word embedded problems for a long, long time. And, the other comment that I wanted to make was that you mentioned it wasn't very sophisticated, but once again, we're being shown malware only has to be as sophisticated as it needs to be to work. There's no need to over-engineer this stuff, depending on the complexity of the target you're going after.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's the point. That's the point. I mean, this is we don't really know exactly how effective it was, but it works.
Right.
So, and it doesn't. I guess the other point that I wanted to make is this is not the kind of thing that requires huge amounts of sophistication to pull off.
No, especially when, probably the most, I wouldn't say difficult thing or whatnot, but the timeliness of just making sure that it is referencing some sort of political event or event of interest that's going on at the time.
Absolutely.
We see this all the time with, phishing attempts and spam, related to some news event going on. This is, a little more focused and targeted, but certainly I think that this is the way that social engineering is going. People can quickly target certain folks with certain types of documents that sound like something that is relevant to their interests and have a higher click-through rate, I imagine.
Right.
The other thing, of course, being a McAfee blog, we are assured that McAfee does block all of the exploits that they talk about in this particular posting.
As of the time of the writing, which by the way drives me crazy about these security vendors, is they're more than happy to write this, but I gotta wonder, back in 2011, 2012, 2013, was that actually the case?
Well, and this is the other thing that they mentioned, that they, during late 2014 and early 2015, attackers modified the shellcode and dropped the malware family, continuously changing their tools and techniques. Right.
So I'm very skeptical that, just based on what we know of antivirus, that they always detected it. And I'm sure they detect it in its current incarnation, but.
Right. Yeah. To be clear, I 100% agree with you that relying on only an AV, no matter how great their blog posting is probably not going to help you.
Which kind of goes to the next question of, well, what do you do? And this is a difficult question because macro, the macro style viruses. And by the way, it's not entirely clear to me if this is a macro virus or if this was using an exploit in Office. But regardless, coming up with ways to defend against those actually are a little bit different, because in the exploit case, something like EMET may help you. In the macro case, EMAP probably will not help you.
That's true. Whitelisting would help in certain circumstances. Not sure how well a whitelisting app like a Bit9 or similar would deal with macro level word attack. We also don't know if these were patched vulnerabilities that were left unpatched or if these are 0 days.
Right.
So my gut when it's a word vulnerability is keep word patched. But I don't know, at least I haven't heard of a lot of existing ODAs running around against Word right now. But there's no guarantee that I would know about those. But it's not something we often hear like we do about Java or Flash.
Right. Agreed. I'm thinking more that it's probably more of a macro virus, but we don't know.
Which is interesting because, again, if you get something in email, if you're in any sort of modern version of Word, it will disable macros on that particular document until you click Enable Macros.
Right.
So there's a lot we don't know, but makes it tough to give advice on how to fix it. But it's what we're talking about.
There was a I don't remember who wrote it, but I read an article recently about some of the social engineering tricks that the malware authors will use to trick you to turn on or to enable a macros. And basically one of the tricks is they'll either they'll claim that it's a secure, they'll have some kind of a security looking banner that basically tells you that in order for you to view the document securely, you have to enable macros because it's, and I hate to say it, right? But we've often shot ourselves in the foot by some of these things, right? So
indeed.
Anyway, don't have a great overall, all around solution for that. But I guess if somebody has some recommendations for defending against macroviruses, send them in. info@defensivesecurity.org. Our next story comes from esecurityplanet.com. Boy, that just sounds like such a .com name. Anyway, the title is PCI Compliance Still a Challenge. This is referencing a Verizon report.
Which, I will just say up front, go read the whole Verizon report. It's good.
Oh, it is. It is good. But, oh boy.
It's long. I'll warn you. It's like 87 pages long.
Yes, but it's worth it.
But there's good stuff in there.
Right. The summary, I mean, even if you only read the summary article here, there's some interesting points. Among them, the oft cited no entity has ever been breached that was in full compliance with PCI, which drives me insane. And they go on to say, oh, go ahead.
When you say insane, do you mean like insane in the membrane?
Yes.
Insane in the brain.
Insane in the brain.
Okay, carry on.
So they also make the point that in their report they find that nearly 70%, just quoting here, as the study has discovered, nearly 70% of organizations surveyed that had achieved PCI DSS compliance fell out of compliance the following year. And when you pair that up with the comment that there has never been an entity in full compliance with PCI breached, I'm really skeptical that any entity is ever actually in full compliance.
Well, and they talk to this. They say, look, they're in compliance at the moment that the auditor is doing the audit, and then they start, for lack of a better term, getting lazy about it and fall back out of compliance for various reasons. And they actually they break down the 12 different criteria in the full report, the 12 different PCI criteria. What is most likely for them to fall out of compliance on? And it's the things you would expect that are most difficult to do day over day over day over day.
Well, I guess I'm a little more cynical in that I just don't know that it's practical in a PCI audit to have full awareness of the entire environment and the state of everything.
Well, keep in mind when we're doing a PCI audit, we're actually taking samples.
No, I get it. Right.
So,
But if you have a very large environment, right?
Yeah.
And when you look
So-
at how things have failed, it's segmentation and isolation, right?
So are you saying that PCI is unobtainable for a sufficiently complex environment?
I think we're deluding ourselves to think that it is. Yes.
Okay.
So the thing that struck me, and I know I take hell every time I say this, right? The report goes in, they don't talk about it much in this article, right? But the report actually goes into some suggestions about, how can you simplify, or should we simplify the process of PCI compliance and on and on and on. And honestly, I think that might be the wrong question to ask. I kind of like the way the banking sector does it, right? And the way the banking sector does it is, it's not I mean, obviously, if you're a bank, they'll come out and do some PCI-like testing and auditing, right? But one of the key things they want to see is that you have a management system in place that understands what the risks are. You stay on top of it, and you have management that just gives a damn, right? And that's what they're really out there to test. And it seems like that's an opportunity, I think, for PCI or anyway. I that just seems intuitive to me to help with some of the failings that they're pointing out in this report.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd also say, in talking with some of my friends as well who are working on PCI, one thing I see a lot is scope reduction is an incredibly important thing to do by properly segmenting your environments that are PCI in scope. And I think where some organizations shoot themselves in the foot is they don't architect with PCI scope in mind, and then not everything, or too much is in scope, and it just causes even more and more challenges. So, and the problem is, once you're built and up and running, and you're doing stuff that is ultimately cardholder data, related, it's a lot more difficult to re-architect and change than it is to build it that way. So, hopefully, going forward, if people do net new build outs of data center environments and whatnot, they'll keep PCI scope in mind to try to completely isolate their PCI environments.
Yeah, and to be honest, I think that is one of the areas, looking backwards, where we have seen a lot of failures. And I think that's also one of the things that PCI 3 is intending to solve, is the issue of isolation, because it is very common for organizations to try to isolate or focus the PCI assessment on the CDE. And, by demonstrating that they have this segmentation. Unfortunately, as we've seen in Target and other cases, the segmentation doesn't really exist much beyond the network map.
Yeah. You really got to know it and test it.
Exactly.
To understand it, and that takes a lot of discipline, and it takes a lot of knowledge. And it also takes really good change control.
Right.
Which, again, some would see as slowing the business down.
Right. So, anyhow, recommend if PCI is something you care about, it's a good report to read. All right, moving on to our next story, which comes from ZDNet, and the title is "Feds Hot on the Trail of JP Morgan Hackers." This is a follow-up story to one that we covered late last year. And at the time, just for the sake of those who may have forgotten, at the time, JP Morgan had been breached, and it was apparently through a web server. They lost somewhere around 80 million records of homeowner data here in the U.S., and they allegedly found this intrusion as a result of one of their, I think they called it the corporate challenge site, if memory serves, had been breached. And in the incident response, they decided to go look for indicators of compromise, and they found something on their main website, and sure enough, bing bang boom, they found this. So at the time, again, I want to focus the point that it was believed, it was reported, in fact, that the breach happened through an external website. And this report says that, let's see, I'm quoting here, the cyber attackers were able to access JP Morgan's networks through a compromised employee computer which was infected with malware. The malicious code then established a VPN tunnel into the corporate systems, granting the hackers access to the database where sensitive information was stored. So, that's quite a different story.
Yeah, something has changed.
And kind of goes back to, yet another probably phishing email. We don't know. There's no.
Well, I think we can state definitively that phishing and email-borne initiations of attacks are the most popular vector that we see being used in these big public attacks. So by God, show up your email defenses.
Yes.
You want to spend some worthwhile money? Go look at some more advanced email defense.
That's right.
And I'm not saying just add an antivirus gateway at your email. Go
Right.
look at something that actually vets the links like a Proofpoint or runs the attachments in a sandbox like a FireEye or, gets a lot more sophisticated with the inbound email.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. So the rest of the story is, it's kind of interesting. They quote a New York Times report who I think in turn quotes some unnamed federal officials who are involved in the investigation who believe that they are very near issuing charges against some people who are responsible for the, quote, cyber attack. And those people actually reside in countries where they believe they can be extradited from. So
question.
Interesting.
If you're going to say that, they're likely to see this, and wouldn't that spook them, and then they could perhaps run to a country that doesn't have extradition? Isn't this kind of a bad tip of the hand?
I'm often very cynical in how I view this and wonder quite often if there are not ulterior motives for releasing such things.
Yes, I would concur.
I.e., if you want to confirm your suspicions about someone, maybe you do this and watch their reaction. I don't know. Then you mug them when they're on vacation in Fiji.
I think you're right. I think these are very coordinated, thought out statements made for purposes beyond just to inform the public.
That's right. So the last story we have is from PNJ.com. Hard-hitting news from PNJ.com.
Which is the Pensacola News Journal.
So the title is Sacred Heart Health Systems Billing Information Hacked. There were two interesting things about this article. Number one is a brain-splitting quote.
Yeah, this one hurts. Prepare yourselves.
So,
good luck.
Yep. I'm just going to read the first two paragraphs verbatim. The billing information of 14,000 Sacred Heart Health Systems patients was compromised recently when an employee email account of the healthcare provider's third-party billing vendor was hacked. No medical records were breached, but hackers gained access to patient names, dates of service, dates of birth, diagnoses and procedures, total charges, and physician names. The social security numbers of 40 patients were also exposed. Yeah, go ahead.
So if I've got diagnoses and procedures and charges, how is that different than a medical record?
So I actually asked my good buddy Martin Fisher that yesterday, and he didn't have a great answer, although he said that clearly what they lost was EPHI, but they apparently are playing some games with the definition of medical records. So I don't know that either. All I can assume is that they consider medical records to be probably the printed paper things that are in the files. I don't know. I mean,
Okay.
but so
So the charts they walk around with and flip them on doctor shows.
exactly, I'm assuming that is, that they were unable to make photocopies of those papers, and therefore the medical records were not.
So the hackers
stolen.
have to run in, grab a handful, and run out to breach the medical records.
I assume. I assume they may actually find a way to, not call that a medical record too. I don't know. I don't know what a medical record is, if not that. But again, this is another case where your supply chain is a problem, right? This was not an attack on the hospital or the health system itself. It was a third party. They outsourced their billing to a third party. The third party billing company is the one who was breached yet again by phishing.
Oh, we need a sound effect for that.
Yes,
because it seems to come up over and over and over.
Yes. So that is something I think to really pay attention to. What kind of data do your third parties have access to of yours? What kind of access into your environment, your networks, your applications, and whatnot do your vendors have? And what kind of controls do they have? And, I hate to say it, but I really think at some point we're going to have to advance off of the stupid, kabuki dance spreadsheet game we play with vendors. Do you have antivirus? Yes. And when I say yes, I mean that periodically we run Malwarebytes free version. Like Fazio.
It's top end stuff, man. Leading edge.
That's right. So yeah, that's I suspect that 2015 is probably going to be from a defensive standpoint the kind of the year of the vendor or the supply chain. So anyhow, that's our last story for the evening. Anything else you wanted to cover or mention?
Just circling back around to B-Sides. Some of the other talks were pretty interesting. John Foster did a talk on the economics from a stock price standpoint of breached companies and how a breach does not necessarily kill the stock. And it is somewhat counterintuitive to what you would think. And it's worth looking up once that gets published as well. And I had some fun at Lockpick Village, learning to pick some more locks. And it was a good event. I really appreciate those guys setting up and the sponsors who pay for it. And we also met some listeners, had some great talks. A lot of folks came up and said hello, which was great, and we really appreciated that. One, just as I had spilled my iced coffee, which was a little bit awkward and embarrassing. It's a bad time to be an E-list celebrity when a fan comes up, but I appreciate everybody saying hello, and so yeah.
It was really very cool to see how many people at Besides Atlanta were listeners. I mean, I think there were at least 10 or so.
And as usual, they flocked around Jerry, and Jerry just made me hold his coffee.
Yeah, yep, absolutely.
That's fine. I'll just
even though you were the star of the entire show.
It's not my fault. Your talk got rejected. Yeah, my talk made people cry.
Well,
I heard
that's
that on Twitter.
That's true. Nice job. Nice job.
One thing I learned is when you've got your audience and they're with you, and you're all in a dark place together, and you're going through a dark topic, and they're engaged. The dumbest joke you can think of will make them laugh because they want a release. So my jokes go over really well when I'm in the middle of a really dark talk. That's one thing I learned out of that presentation.
It's pretty much the only time they go over well.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But my talk has gotten some interest. A reporter reached out to me. I'm not sure why, but we're going to talk tomorrow.
That's great.
Yeah, that's the first time that's ever happened.
That's awesome.
So we'll see. We'll see what comes of that. But otherwise, no, just a big shout out to the organizers, volunteers, and sponsors of B-Sides Atlanta. It was a good event. Glad they did it. Good space. I enjoyed it.
Good deal.
Would buy again.
Had fun. It was a lot of fun. I wish I wasn't so sick for it, but
yeah,
anyhow, as usual, we appreciate you listening to the show. If you like the show, go on iTunes and give us some 5-star love. We do enjoy that. And you can find the show notes, which are links with our links to the stories we talk about, at our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. You can find the show on Twitter at DefensiveSec. You can find Mr. Callett on Twitter at Lerg. That's L-E-R-G. And me on Twitter at MaliciousLink. And with that, I think we will call it a week and talk to you again next time.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. Appreciate you.
Take care. Weird.
Maybe your mom doesn't have the code for it.
Yep. There it is.
I mean, you are from downriver.
Oh, you're not going to pull that shit out. I think we should all just move to Snapchat.
I think we should just all be on chat roulette.
The whole podcasting without pants thing is close to a whole new level. And you are on mute. God f***ing damn it. And I say within reason because I know that Link State will come up with some really crazy ass
My God. No,
scotch.
Now that he's heard his name on the show again, he's just gonna...
I know. Maybe I'll beep it out.
And then the listener will never know who it was.
That's true.
It'll drive him crazy. We mentioned one of you.
That's true. And the attacker... Oh, bloody hell. Hang on.
Hanging.
That goddamn phone rings like once a month.
And
now
was the time.
And now was the time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.